Yeah, well. On December 23rd, it's supposed to be 1-2-3, 1-2-3.
That out. Let's do this. Hello, welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. Apparently my verbal skills are like Iowa basketball's shooting skills from the last two games. Not good right now for Hawkeye fans. It was a bad couple of nights. A bad, awful Tuesday night for the Iowa women in College Park at Maryland. And then last night, the Iowa men, not so good up in Madison. It was worse than the weather, so to speak. So we're going to talk about that and more here on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. I am Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We are Thursday, February the 23rd, a little bit before 9:15 a.m. Central Time. It is 2:23, Scott. I don't know if that means anything, but I thought it was neat.
Yeah, it's a nice number, and the last day of this year, I guess it is, will be 12/31/23, which is 1-2-3, 1-2-3. So I don't know if we'll be in a bowl game at that point, but either way, these numbers are fun to play with.
Yeah, and in relation to that, Iowa was 3 for 28 from 3-point range last night. Not good. It's been a bad couple games. Do you have the numbers in front of you? The ugly numbers, bad luck. Well, did not shoot well at Northwestern on Sunday in a 20-point loss, something like that, in Evanston, and then last night faded against Wisconsin, and as I said, shot 3 of 28 for 3. Just not a good shooting team on the road for whatever reason, Scott.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the last two games, they're 6 of 51 from 3 in Northwestern and Wisconsin, and I've seen a lot of angst over the ball, and I'm like, maybe it's a factor, but I'm not going to give them any kind of excuses on this. Everybody's got to go to Camp Randall, Cole Center. Feels like Camp Randall at times. Everybody's got to go there. You got to go to Evanston. You got to go to Maryland, when I don't think they are this year, actually, but to play with different kinds of ball textures and what have you. They didn't shoot real well at Minnesota either. They didn't shoot well at Nebraska or Penn State until the end. And so this is a road thing. It's not really a ball thing. And I'm not giving them any excuses. That I don't care what the ball is. You play with the ball that you've got. That's why you have a shoot around. That's why you get there a day before the game and get used to it. They should be practicing with it if they're going on the road, and move on. I mean, this is, if it's a little bit heavier, so be it. Who cares? Move on. I don't want to give them any excuses because they don't deserve any.
Yeah, and it wasn't like Wisconsin played exceptionally well last night. That's not I don't want to say vintage or high-end Wisconsin team. It plays the style that we have come to know and loathe in watching Wisconsin basketball. I actually fell asleep with like 2 minutes left in the game last night. That's how I was doing. I was fading anyway. Still fighting a bit of a cold, but Wisconsin basketball is not entertaining. It's not exciting to see. I'm sure it is for Wisconsin fans. They win a lot of games, but both Sunday and last night, Scott, the opponent forced its pace on Iowa. And you can say, well, part of that is Iowa not shooting well. Well, that also factors into it. Those are two pretty good defensive teams that seemed okay with Iowa shooting from deep. I mean, if you're going to pick your poison with Chris Murray, you'd rather him shoot 3-pointers than to work you in the post and in the lane. And he's not playing well either right now. When your best player is not playing well and you're not shooting well overall as a team, that's just a poor and bad recipe.
No question. And I think what they're looking for are easy answers, and these teams aren't giving them to them. Ohio State did, because Ohio State's Ohio State, but you've got to, settling for 3-pointers is fine. Probably at home, it's really what you want, but on the road, these teams are defending you and they're just daring you to hit them, and they're not shooting very well from three. So I think again, easy answers. You're shooting 6 of 51 the last 2 games. That's what, less than 12% from three the last 2 games. You're not going to win any games like that. You know what? At Northwestern, I'm not saying I give them a pass, but that's a good team ascending, a very good defense, and they were playing really, really well, and they shot the ball well. Those games happen in basketball. People want to get upset, and you can't treat it like football. I mean, sometimes you just go on the road and get beat. That's why in the NBA there's best 4 out of 7. It's because some teams one night are playing well, other teams aren't. But last night was not that way. This is not a good Wisconsin team. This isn't, there's no Frank Kaminsky and Bronson Koenig and Jordan Taylor or any of those guys. They're not coming out there to play. So this is a very ordinary team that's probably in NIT territory to me. And so to go there and shoot the ball as pathetically as they have and did, it really needs to be more. There needs to be some, they need to have some answers. And how do they do that? Well, it's not chucking up more threes. Maybe it will be on Saturday against Michigan State because you're at home, and that'll, the home crowd and the environment will make it easier. But overall, I think they're not working well enough in the half court, and they're just settling for shots, and then they're taking open ones and missing them. So it's kind of a recipe for disaster. And if they play like this, they will not win another game in the regular season, probably not in the Big Ten tournament, and probably not in the postseason.
And as somebody who's followed Fran McCaffrey, Scott, that one of the staples is Iowa usually makes more free throws than the opponent attempts. Mm-hmm. And when you're taking 3-pointers, and what I've noticed too is some of those 3-pointers, Iowa will get an offensive rebound. And I know some people feel like, the 3-point shot after an offensive rebound is a high percentage shot, but you also have to understand kind of what, time and score. If you're not making shots, you can't just expect to keep shooting them. Do something different. Maybe you get that offensive rebound, you work offense for a little bit and maybe get a better open look from 3, or preferably get to the basket and draw fouls. Last night, going back to Sunday's game at Northwestern, Iowa was 11 for 16 from the line. Northwestern was 16 for 20 from the foul line. Iowa has shot their free throws are down. They took 7 free throws at Purdue. They had 15, so they were even with Minnesota. They each attempted 15, and that game was a struggle. Ohio State was 11 for 11 from the line. Iowa was 8 for 11 from the line. Sunday, Iowa 11 for 16, as I said. Northwestern 16 for 20, and then similar out last night. Wisconsin 10 of 18 from the line. Iowa 9 for 13. So you're not making 3-pointers, and it's almost like passive. You're not really running your offense. You're not drawing fouls on the opposition. And that's something that stuck out to me as well. It's kind of that double-edged sword with the missing threes and not getting to the line and getting some easy offense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got to create it. You've got to be aggressive. And Iowa has really been very passive, as you kind of explained there. And you get the board, but then you shoot it out for 3. And sometimes it feels like a dagger play. Like, wow, you worked it, you missed a shot, you got the board, you got the 3. Now the other team's a little deflated, but that's, again, simplistic. I don't think that's the way you want to really treat this. I think you've got to work, and these teams aren't going to just let you beat them. I mean, when you talk about the last 2 teams in particular, Northwestern had been ascending, beat Purdue, beat Indiana, then beat Iowa, and Iowa had a chance. I mean, it's weird to think about this, Rob, that on Sunday going into that game, Iowa had a chance to be number 2 in the Big Ten. Now they're 9th, and there's a lot of teams, kind of jumbled together, but the other part is, they allowed Ohio State to shoot more than 50% from the floor. It was just turnovers that really changed the dynamic of that game. And they won decisively. And Ohio State looks up. If I want to talk about Wisconsin looking nothing like what it did 10 years ago, Ohio State is not even a shadow of its former self back when they had, some of the best teams in the Big Ten the last 20 years. So Iowa has to figure something out very quickly. And now you have Michigan State coming in on Saturday, where Iowa's played well against Michigan State, but Michigan State's not just going to say, well, we're going to come in and lay down. The way Tom Izzo coaches, they're going to be physical. They're going to be aggressive man to man. That means there's not going to be many 3-point attempts that are uncontested, and you're going to have to beat them on the boards. And Iowa has just been, again, fairly passive. And then, a lot of people want to start to talk about the January fade. It's really a myth, because a lot of times when you look at it in February, they're playing Big Ten teams. So sometimes you lose games, that just happens. But it's got the real potential for that, to lose 2 in a row, Michigan State at home, then and Indiana. I'm not predicting a win there. And then automatically you go from being almost second in the league to losing 4 in a row, and playing a hot Nebraska team with, arguably, at least from one publication, the coach of the year in the Big Ten. So, I think that's, if you lose 5 straight there, you're clearly on the bubble. It's not even question. And then your Eastern Illinois loss really comes into play as far as discussion purposes. And you got a lot of pressure going in the Big Ten tournament. So whatever they do, maybe it's just a day off that they need. Maybe it's a really crazy physical practice. I don't know. I don't know the team well enough. Fran does, or, should. But whatever it needs to happen, they need to really start being more in tune with, it's going to be difficult. So make sure you're prepared for it, difficult mentally as much as physically.
Yeah, and like you said, Saturday 11 a.m. against Michigan State at home at Carver should be a good crowd. That's a grind. Playing Michigan States like Wisconsin and Northwestern with, this Northwestern team is just kind of a grind it out. You got to be tough. You got to be, all those cliches, mentally tough. You got to grind it out. They're going to be plays that don't work. They're going to be, runs by the other team. You're going to go through droughts, but you just have to. And last night, it was kind of nip and tuck. I think there were 14 lead changes or something like that in that game. And then Wisconsin finally proved to be the tougher team. It just made some shots, continued to play defense. Iowa never got going offensively, and that was the difference. It's just a jumbled Big Ten, Scott. You look, Iowa's 2-game losing streak is the 3rd longest in the league right now. Just 2 games, because that's how just back and forth it's been in this league this year. Minnesota's lost 11 in a row. Ohio State's lost 8 in a row. And then Iowa has 2 losses in a row. The longest win streak currently in the league is Northwestern at 5 in a row. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams have 1 win. They've won their last game after losing their previous game. And then Penn State has won 2 in a row, and Nebraska's won 3 in a row. So some of those bottom teams are playing well. So there are no gimmies in this league, and it'd be foolish to think, you could just roll it out there on Saturday and beat Michigan State. That just doesn't happen. And then, like you said, that Nebraska game at the end, winning at Indiana is going to be very difficult. I mean, if you're Iowa, you obviously want to win all 3 of these games, but you have to have the 2 at home. You have to have Michigan State and Nebraska. You have to win those 2 home games. That gets you to 11. And then if you can somehow pull it off on the road in Bloomington, great. But 11 and 9, You're probably playing on day 2. Possibly, I don't know. It depends on how these tiebreakers shake out. It's so jumbled up. But you got to get some momentum going in the Big Ten tournament. And you don't want to fall to an 8-9 seed. It seems like Iowa's on the 6-7 line right now. There's just a lot to play for right now. And, Iowa is in a position where, unlike Nebraska or Penn State, who are kind of having it going right now, Iowa's got to figure something out here and stop the bleeding, so to speak.
Right. And it's, they have history with climbing back. And if they didn't, then I think this would be something I would be incredibly worried about for them. And that is, they started the Big Ten season 0-3. They had the just inexplicable. I understand that they had a lot of people out against Eastern Illinois, but still, you just do not lose to a team like that. I remember the day, it was signing day, and there was a bad weather coming in, so they hiked the game up to like 2:30 in the afternoon. And
yep,
Connor sat out, Chris sat out. There was another player who was out, and it was
Ulyss, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was Ulyss. And they didn't play very well, but they didn't play well defensively either. I mean, they just played like they were.
And that's a problem for this team, Scott. When it's not shooting the ball well or playing well offensively, it has a tendency to trickle over to defense.
Yeah, and last night I know some people were complaining about the defense, and I'm like, that's a terrible offense that they played against. I'm sorry, we know Wisconsin's style. It's kind of like Iowa football style. You know what you're going to get, but you can tell when it's not good. They played that style really well when they had Frank Kaminsky and, the guy that had the hair that's in the league now, Sam Decker and those guys. But now they don't have anything remotely close to that. It just looks like, to me, both games against Wisconsin that they lost, the first one being in Carver, I thought, how did you lose to this team? I mean, this is not a good Wisconsin team. But that being said, it's just you continue to go down this path, and then you put yourself in jeopardy. You're probably still, at this point, unless you lose out, you're probably still going to get in the tournament. But you could put yourself in Dayton, and that's not where you want to be. You could put yourself on on a line in the Big Ten tournament where you're one and done, and you don't want to be there either, because then you sweat out that Sunday. And and I know again, kind of going back to the February fade, because it's getting heavily discussed now. And
that's the beauty of me not being on Twitter as much these days. I don't have to engage and absorb and consume the strong narratives that exist in every fan base, and we know the ones within this one.
Right. And the interesting thing is, I did look this up, by the way, and that is, through this year, before this year started, they were 45-38 in February. That makes the whole thing moot in many ways. Last year they were 7-1 in February, but three of the best teams, at least before the Garza / Keegan Murray era, all had it. That they were rough and they struggled. And then this year they're 3-3 right now. Before Sunday they won 9 out of 12, so they had it going.
9 out of 12 in February, or 9 out of 12
overall?
This season? Yeah,
overall they were 3-1 in February.
Right.
So it was, now they're 3-3, and they've got 3 more games. I suppose the narrative is tough to beat, especially with 2 straight losses.
I don't know what the numbers are, Scott. Maybe you know where to find them, but it's been tough to win on the road for everybody in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, I'd have to go team by team on that one.
Yeah,
maybe I will
if somebody's in the chat room that wants to do the homework for us, go ahead. Scott and I are not. We don't do our homework.
Yeah, but so is February an issue for Iowa? I don't think so. You got to remember who you play.
It's conference basketball.
Right. The one thing that kind of sealed it was, there were 3, or the 14 team fell apart. It was 1-7. And then in 2016, when they're ranked as high as number 3 in the country, they finished 2-6. Those 2 years really sealed that narrative. and it's understandable because both teams looked burned out for different reasons, but they both looked burned out at that point. The remaining teams, like this one or whatever, it's not really a fade as much as it is just, again, not being able to make shots on the road. And that's
didn't Aaron White's senior year, didn't they? They played really well at the end of the season.
They won 6 straight.
Yeah.
So it's last year they were 7-1 in February. Yeah. So, it's really, to me, this is it just happens that way. It in every single facet of sports, when things don't go your way, you look for reasons and then you lean on those, and it's almost as lazy as taking a 3-point shot, working it into the post and drawing your fouls to get to the free throw line.
And Phillip's been just so effective this year that, I mean, how many shots did he take last night? That was another thing. I'm like, God, get to him. He took 10 shots last night. That's not terrible. 6 of 10. Mm-hmm. And he was 1 for 4 at the foul line. But I think you got to work, and I think Chris has got to get, there were he took a couple threes last night where, okay, you're wide open from 3, but there was also a direct path to the basket too. That's how open you were. You're not hitting threes. Yeah, I know, shooters, the next one's going in, but take it to the basket, throw it down, try to throw it down, draw a foul, give yourself a little, give the team a little bit of juice, but because that's the type of stuff that gets you going when you're aggressive and you get fouls called on the opposition. That Iowa feeds off of that. When Iowa starts getting to the line a lot and taking it to the opponent at the rim, they kind of it snowballs, and they start to, then you can open up and work inside out and maybe get some threes in rhythm. A lot of these threes aren't coming in rhythm or within a flow of the offense. Some are. I mean, they're not all bad shots, but when you're struggling, try something different.
All right. And I think in some ways it's kind of like it's kind of like money. When you're young, you work for your money, and when you're older, your money works for you. And in some ways it's the same way with basketball. Work for your points. Get to the post, force it up there, force them to foul you, get to the foul line. And once you're at the foul line, that's like interest. You're making money. You're not doing anything other than hitting shots. And instead of going 9 for 13, this is the type of team that when they're winning or they're competing at a high level, that number might be, 20 of 28, or, even then that's not really that good, but it's still, you're getting there. You're making more shots. You're shooting more free throws you're making more free throws than the other team attempts, but they're not really going there. And then when you have Chris Murray going 2 for 10 from the field, he's missing close. He's not really, he's being real passive around the basket. I think he's not going up strong. Peyton Sanford, he had 10 points, but there wasn't really a good 10 points, if you know what I mean. Patrick McCaffrey did not play well at all. And Connor didn't play that well, other than on, getting some rebounds. And so it was really a collective effort. But still and maybe they all know that. Maybe, we're just, we're bringing it up. They already know it. Today they're going to really lock down, or they're going to get loose. Generally under Fran, they usually get really tough, those practices. And then sometimes that's pushed them the other way. But, I don't know that sometimes he goes the loose, like, hey guys, let's just take today off. I don't know that he does that. It's more the other way. But we'll find out on Saturday. We will know really early whether this team is capable of, okay, just shrugging it off, moving forward, or if they start to press, they start to take the easy way out, and Michigan State buries them, because they're very much capable of doing that. And then if that's the case, this team's got a real problem on its hands.
And we saw Sunday, Fran lost it, got thrown out, and that didn't really inspire the team. They fell apart after that. Last night, he was a little bit more calm. I mean, there were some questionable calls. He didn't freak out at all. He was much more reserved, I thought, through most of the game. That didn't work. It's really up. You got, Rebracha's 25, Connor's 24, Chris is, an older junior. Patrick's been around. There's enough. Ulyss, Perkins, they've all been around. They've got to figure this out. I mean, these guys have been around. They know each other. They know each other's games. The coaches can do so much, but these guys kind of have to figure. These guys are going to have to kind of figure it out and take it on their shoulders on Saturday to get that win. Because I think if you get that win on Saturday against Michigan State, the ship is righted, so to speak. Even if you lose at Indiana, you got that 10th win in the league. You're at least 500 in the league. That's kind of that hurdle to get over. And that's kind of where they are. And you look at, if you're a net person, the net rankings, Iowa fell from 41 to 44 with last night's loss. That's in the so-so area.
Yeah, that's kind of dangerous, to be honest with you. I mean, they're probably in the low 50s at this point, because you consider there are 32 automatic berths, and
right?
Then, 36 at larges, and then you start to subtract. I do that too damn much. I'm bored, but and I'm not a big fan of the net anyway. I think it's kind of a bullshit statistic.
Yeah.
The more I'm around, because I look at the Big 12 and it's like, can any of these teams actually fall? I look at Iowa State and the way they're playing. They're in the same boat as Iowa, in my opinion, and they've lost some major non-conference games by decisive margins. Yet they're still in the teens. And you look at Iowa.
They went from 18 to 17 last night without playing Iowa State.
Yeah, right. And they're
just losing.
Yeah, after just losing. And I mean, they're 9-6 or whatever it is. Oh, that's some women. I'm sorry. They're 8-7 or maybe 8-8. I don't know.
They are 7-9 in quad one games, and Iowa is 6-8.
Yeah. And they got bombed by Iowa. They got bombed by Missouri. They got bombed by UConn. So they have, so it's not like they've done anything other than being in a league where everybody entered with a high net, and they've all stayed at a high net because they beat each other. In the Big Ten, everybody entered in the 20 to 30 range, and then they're all kind of jumbled there except for Purdue. And because, you look at Illinois, for instance. Illinois began the week at 27. And they haven't played other than Monday night against Minnesota. So they did play Monday night. They fell from 27 to 31 just by beating Minnesota. And now they're at 34. So they've fallen from 27 to 34 by winning. It's kind of ridiculous. And
yeah.
And Northwestern is now, since beating Iowa, fell went from 39 to 37 with the win to now 38, and then 39 and then 38. So it's just, I don't like it. I think it's stupid. I think they need to either, I almost think the AP poll reflects the best teams better than anybody. And that's crazy to think, but it's, actually humans watching games. And, but that said, all that being said is Iowa has 3 more games in the Big Ten plus the tournament. It still has a good chance at getting a decent seed in the NCAA tournament. You want to hold serve at home. I think at a minimum, if you win a game in the Big Ten tournament, then you feel like you're probably out of the 8-9 zone. You may be a 7, you may be a 6. But if they lose to Michigan State, lose to Indiana, maybe they beat Nebraska, but then they go 0-1 in the Big Ten tournament, you could be looking at anything from 9 seed to Dayton. And this team is in a weird spot.
Yeah, the Nebraska loss, a loss to Nebraska would be bad. They're 89th right now in the RPI. I think Michigan State is 36, did I say? Yeah, 36. And Indiana is 19. So opportunities there. You don't want to lose to Nebraska. That is a can't lose game. The other two, I just think, again, if you're an Iowa player, you're part of the Iowa basketball team, you want to go 3-0. But I think the way this season's gone, you go 2-1 here to finish the regular season. That puts you at 11-9. Let the chips fall where they may in terms of all these crazy tiebreakers and whatever else happens around you. Then maybe you get a win on Thursday, or if you get the double bye, if you're fortunate enough to get a double bye, depending on what happens around you, that pushes up your NCAA seed for sure. At 1-2 here, that's going to be tough.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the fascinating part about this is that really what Iowa needs to do now is, we could take the 20,000 foot view, and look at it and go, okay, going to Indiana is going to be tough. And you said they want to go 3-0 and you wouldn't want them to think any differently. But really, it's all about Saturday at this point.
Mm-hmm.
They need to worry about Saturday. They need to just strip it all away and go straight to Clicheville, which is one possession at a time, 1 minute at a time, one game and one possession, everything. It's all about playing as tough and aggressive as they can, because if they play well, they'll win. Michigan State is in the same ballpark as they are. This is not a great Michigan State team. We've seen great ones, and this isn't one of them. But they could also lose by 15 or 20, like if they play the way they have the last couple of weeks, and, get behind, allow Michigan State to dictate tempo, be physical with them, miss threes, get down on themselves. But I think, what's the other part is I think Fran might need to alter his bench a little bit here. I'm not saying Josh Agundale is going to be a good player for them, but I think you're going to have to get some sort of post presence with physicality. And if that means he goes in for 6 minutes a game, 2 possessions in each half, 1 possession in each half, and he picks up 2 or 3 fouls, fine. But you're just going to have to do that to allow Rebraca and probably Connor McCaffrey and Chris Murray to just, not have to get banged up in the post as often as they do, because and it doesn't have to be a lot. Josh Dix only played 6 minutes. He probably should have played more, but I think that's something that they need to do, or you could wear your guys out, because it's going to come fast and furious for the next few weeks.
Saturday, February the 25th, gold out game, 11 a.m., rare 11 a.m. Saturday game, ESPN. Michigan State comes to town. Michigan State with a solid win the other night, and they've certainly had a lot on their plate, just from an emotional standpoint. And I'm sure Fran has a press conference on Friday this week. I'm sure he'll address the tragedy at Michigan State. Awful situation there, and you feel for those guys, what they're going through. Saturday, they will be in Iowa City. What should we do? What should we do here? Let's take a break. I'll do a read. We'll hear some more commercials. Support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for supporting the podcast, doing great work now for over 50 years. Let's hear from a few more of the sponsors, and Scott and I will be back on the other side. We're back. Thank you to the sponsors. We'll flip over to Iowa women's basketball now, Scott, and different scenario for the Iowa women. Much greater expectations coming into this season with 4 starters back from a successful team last year that won or shared the Big Ten regular season title, won the Big Ten tournament. Awful game Tuesday in Maryland. I was worried about that game for Iowa for a lot of reasons. Maryland's a good team, being the main one. Revenge from what happened in Iowa City. But that just there's losing, and then there's just folding, and it looked like Iowa folded in that game, and it just kept getting worse. So that's one you'd have to flush and come back from. Still a lot on the table for Iowa. Obviously not a Big Ten championship now. Indiana has wrapped that up. Iowa can, I believe, still get the second seed in the Big Ten tournament with a win on Sunday against Indiana. And I think the saddest part of it was, Scott, is it takes some luster off that game on Sunday.
Yeah, it does. It's a shame. I mean, but they put themselves in this position, and sometimes teams need a reality check. And I'm not saying that I'm not confirming or denying that this team needed one, but when you play as well as they have been, other than the Indiana game, and I didn't think they played that poorly there. They just played a very good team on the road, and those things happen.
Yeah, and that was the difference. I mean, the Indiana game, they competed. I didn't think they did on Tuesday.
Yeah, they got smacked, figuratively by Maryland. They were very challenging to them. I mean, physically they were, and then also just they were incredible shooting the ball. That happens, and those games happen, and those losses happen. But it seemed to reach a point where everybody knew it wasn't going to happen for Iowa, and they just said, "All right, forget it. We're just done."
Yeah.
And there were only a couple of people I thought that were out there really competing, and I thought Gabby Marshall played well, and I thought Sydney Affolter played well. Other than that, it was just like, nobody played well. And there was one play on there was a steal. Maryland went up for the layup, and Caitlin Clark was trailing and then fouled the Maryland player going up. And I'm like, get her out of there. What are you doing? That's a stupid play regardless. But at this point in the game, why are you doing it? And I think there was a lot of that. There were a lot of missed shots, of course, from three, and some open ones. That was just, and Maryland had it for Iowa. And Maryland's a good team too, by the way. I mean, this isn't just, this wasn't Wisconsin men peppering Iowa. I mean, this was a number 7 ranked team in the country. But
yeah, and the Cedar Rapids native Brenda Fries and the Marion native Lisa Bluter probably are not on each other's Christmas card lists.
No, they understand the stakes, and Iowa put up 96 on them, and then they put 96 up on Iowa, and so I think Maryland seemed very aware, even after that game in Iowa City a few weeks ago, when Brenda Fries was just like seething by the performance, and and it was brought up that how Caitlin Clark and Monica Zanano each combined for 70 points in that game, and then the other day they combined for 22, and I don't think either was very, very good. And certainly I think Zanano it's a concern to me. I'm concerned by some of the ways that she's played, I guess, in the last couple of games. So, but the good thing is for them that they have enough time to mentally recover, physically recover, and then get ready for what's about to happen, which is College Game Day coming to a sold out Carver Hawkeye Arena. They're playing one of the best teams in the country that had already beaten them. And they get a chance to show off the most exciting player in college sports in Caitlin Clark in their home environment. So this is exactly what you want if you're Iowa basketball. Flush it, move on, learn. You do have to learn from that. And I do hope that, there are some games where you just say, we're not even going to watch this. I think Iowa football at Ohio State was one of them. It's like you have nothing to gain from watching that game. I think Iowa women's basketball had a lot to gain from watching the Maryland game. But I also think that there comes a point where you just move on and then go forward.
Yeah, and that's the key here, right? And we talked about expectations and where the bar is. I mean, Iowa's 22-6 at 14-3 and a top 10 team. I mean, let's have, keeping it in perspective, it's what you get out of that Maryland game moving forward. I think it is important to beat Indiana. I think if you get Indiana on Sunday at home, regardless of whether or not it factors in, and it doesn't factor into the Big Ten regular season standings, you get some mojo back. You beat a top 5 team. Then you get some momentum going into the Big Ten tournament. And really, I don't like to, I kind of get annoyed when there's so much emphasis put on the NCAA tournament, but I get it. But really for this Iowa women's team, that's really where now that it'd be great to win the Big Ten tournament again. I mean, that would be another feather in your cap, but really it's about, especially after last year losing to Creighton at home, it's really getting yourself right for the March run, right? If you're the Iowa women, you want to get a run, minimum Sweet 16. You're probably going to get a couple of home games. I mean, you'd really have to be bad. I don't know if it's possible if they lose Sunday and one game in the Big Ten tournament, they'd still probably host. But winning those 2 home games in the NCAA tournament, getting to the Sweet 16, and maybe getting beyond that, that's really, I think, how this team is going to be judged.
Yeah. I mean, when you have, the player that Lord knows I've touted on here, and in several different ways, and Caitlin Clark, who is a national figure, everybody wants them to go far, except for their rivals, of course, and their opponents. You can't tell me that TV doesn't want to have Caitlin Clark get to the Final Four, or something to that effect. So it is about March. It's about, but this team's so good, and it had a bad game, but it's a good team that I think if you could beat Indiana, who's ranked number 2 in the country and has only lost once, and if you could beat them decisively at home in front of your fans in a sold out environment where ESPN College Game Day is there and ESPN Sports Center is going live. And I mean, I think that's something that it's a memory. It's something that you can showcase, and then it kind of puts everything back on the table. Like, all right, we had this bad loss. We shook it off. We're good. We're going forward. And then whatever happens in Minneapolis, whether they get beat in the semis again by Maryland, whether they beat Maryland and lose to Indiana, even lose, you'd hate to say it, but lose to a different team like a Michigan or Ohio State.
Yeah.
But
which is possible.
Yeah. I mean, they're good. They're, they're in the top, at least, 16 right now. So, any of that is possible. I think Illinois has really fallen off. I think they're a tournament team, but I don't think they're a very good one. But, if you could still play, if you could win this game, get to Saturday at a minimum in Minneapolis, I think there's still probably a 2 seed, in the tournament because the strength of schedule is really high, and they want to see Iowa go as far as they can. I mean, it doesn't, women's basketball is a little different than the men's, where they're like, we want our superstar teams and teams that have big fan bases to go. And Iowa certainly does. So I think that's, but then they're going to have to do it too. And last year they had every advantage as well. And they got out physicaled against Creighton and lost that game. Some of it was officials not calling the fouls. Another part is you didn't execute. So I think that's, but everything, again, kind of like with the men in a different way, everything's focused on Sunday for the women.
Yeah. And that's really, for the women, Indiana's 26-1, only 1 loss. I think to Michigan State it was, if I remember correctly, which is odd. But, so winning Sunday, giving Indiana its 2nd loss on the season, as we said, plays well and gives you a little bit of mojo back heading up into Minneapolis next week, and probably secures, top 3 seed with a win on Sunday. They may fall to a 4, but they'd have to probably slip up pretty bad in Minneapolis and lose on Sunday for that to happen. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we saw what happened against Creighton, and then Illinois was kind of a wonky loss this year. For the Iowa women, they just need to be prepared and be able to handle any scenario. If you're getting muscled and the officials aren't calling it, play through it. Don't let it get to you. If you have to grind one out. And that's what they learned against Creighton last year. And I think hopefully that prepares them better for this March, that, you just don't know what you're going to get in the NCAA tournament, and you have to be able to win no matter what style of play is, happening and how the game's being called.
Oh, exactly. And, I think each individual player has something that they need to improve upon. I think you look at, Caitlin is, we've spoken of all of her superlatives, but I think one thing I noticed the other day, sometimes she lets her emotions kind of impact her negatively, but I also think that her incredible passing skills, she's kind of like a quarterback who throws it at triple coverage sometimes. And there were a couple of passes where I'm like, that's just a turnover. That's not anything, you're throwing it in, trying to throw it in the post when it's being double covered. That's not a smart play. That's you trying to make a play when it's not there. And I think so, taking a slight step back, be a little bit more patient. I think that will be very helpful for her. I think Monica Zanano needs some touches in the post. This is going to be a tough game. I mean, Mackenzie Holmes is the second best player in the league. And she reminds me a ton, in fact, of like Megan Gustafson. And I think she's maybe not quite the scorer, but she's a lot like her in the way she competes and the way she plays in the post. And so that's going to be a tough matchup for Zanano, but she's going to have to get hers. And I think one of the things that she struggled with in times is getting those passes to the post, that when the ball's not really thrown in a perfect spot, that it often ends up as a turnover. And so I think she needs to be able to secure the ball a little bit more easily underneath the basket. The other ones, Gabby Marshall had an incredible game, probably her best game of the year the other day, shooting at least 5-10 from 3, but McKenna Warnock did not. She just really looked impatient and disinterested. And so I think they can all assess their performances. I'm sure they do. It's one game. It's not like the men where they have been kind of up and down. The women have had an occasional lapse, and this is one of them. I have no qualms that they're going to turn it around and play really hard and play really well on Sunday. And it's just going to be a matter of, can they execute at a high level against an elite level team that is the best team in the conference. And they proved it throughout the season.
Iowa men on ESPN Saturday, Iowa women on ESPN Sunday. So the spotlight on Carver Hawkeye Arena this weekend. Did get some news on that front as well in women's basketball this week, Scott. Kate Martin and the aforementioned Gabby Marshall will be back next season for the super senior seasons, the COVID year. And McKenna Warnock announced that she will not be back. She does have a year, but she is headed to dental school where she'll make a lot of money after she graduates.
Good for her. Yeah. That's great. That's what it's all about, going to college and getting a degree and doing what you want to do. And, and good for them too, because, one of the rough things, but also one of the smart things that I've noticed, and the statistics back this up, is the WNBA and playing overseas is very limited for female athletes. It's not like men's athletes where you can just be a decent, you can be a starter on a team and then you'll have a chance. You can go over to Romania and play, or Lithuania or Belgium or something like that. There really aren't that many opportunities to play over there. So a lot of times you'll see, with women's athletes, that they do a really good job for the most part of getting the degree in the area that they want to get it in, and using that to further their education and then their professional opportunities outside of basketball. And for Kate Martin and for Gabby Marshall, that this is an opportunity for them to get master's degrees. And that's going to be really useful. I think Kate Martin will end up being a coach. I think she's got that kind of quality, toughness, leadership. She's a lot like Connor McCaffrey in that area. I mean, her dad's a football coach, and I don't know as much about Gabby Marshall in that regard, but still, she's coming back. And then you have Caitlin Clark back. And I think I totaled it up that they have 14 scholarships right now set for next year. And I don't know if Molly Davis, if there's any discussion on that one. I think that's the only lingering one out there. But then,
does she have another year? I know what was she at Central Michigan for 3?
Yeah, for 3.
Okay.
For 1. So I don't know if what's going to happen there. But then, the other part is, Ava Jones is, I don't know if she's going to be a player or on medical, kind of like Michael Loyce with Iowa football a few years ago. And then there's, if you're a post in this country, Iowa has an opening in the post, and you could replace Monica Zanano. So if I'm in the transfer portal and you want to go play with the best guards in the country, I would say that you have really good opportunity to not only be a, to play, but play at a high level for a very good team. So I would expect them to get in the portal and grab a center.
Yeah, and you've got, I think, as we've seen this year, Hannah Stolke is ready to take the next step and move into a larger role next season. And it's nice. I mean, the NIL money, it's not retirement money, but they're getting NIL money. So Kate Martin, Gabby Marshall come back for another year, get some NIL money, get to play basketball again, get to, as Scott said, get a master's degree. There's just I get it. Warnock wants to just focus on dental school. That's great. And then the other two want to come and still play basketball and go to school and get some NIL money. It's nice that the student athletes have more opportunities now than they ever had. And that's the greatest benefit of NIL by far.
Sure it is. And, for all the discussion about collectives and, and it's gotten out of control, I think, in some respects, but there's, you can't put that, one of the many cliches, can't put the genie back in the bottle on that. But for the athletes like the women's basketball team, that they can make money. I mean, Caitlin Clark obviously makes some significant money, but they can, make some money on the side doing the charity work that they were doing anyway, frankly. They were going to all those events, those hospital visits and stuff, and now they can make a little bit more. That's really a good thing. And then they can have camps like in their hometown and get paid for it, and just do other things. And I think that's really important.
Hawkeye hoops at Carver Hawkeye Arena Saturday and Sunday this week. So be nice buzz around town. Head out to local restaurants, support the economy in town here. We appreciate it. This past Sunday at Carver Hawkeye Arena, the last wrestling duel of the season. Scott, the wrestling team, with a decisive win over Oklahoma State. Spencer Lee and company. Was it Max Murin? Mm-hmm. Who else? Real Woods,
Jacob Warner,
senior day for those guys. Last home duel, big crowd, as has been the case all season. Spencer Lee, 51-second pin, his 8th of the season, 34th of his career, 28th career first period pin, 11th fall under a minute. He's now won 52 consecutive matches dating back to 2019, and he finishes his career with a 26-0 record at Carver Hawkeye Arena. He's pretty good.
Yeah, he's got a career, I think, beyond this season, huh? Yeah, it's something else, isn't it? And
I want to mention, check out Caitlin Clark and Spencer Lee did a cool thing for just kind of the GOAT. I forget what the kids call it, but check it out on HawkeyeSports.com. They did something with the university that was entertaining. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm glad that they were able to get that idea from me when I wrote that story. And now they put them together for that. But when you look at what he's accomplished, and when you have guys like Tom Brands, who won 3 national titles and Olympic gold, and one of the best coaches in wrestling history, and Mark Ironside, who was on Monday night on Iowa Live with me, and 2-time national champion, a Hodge Trophy winner, both of them saying that he's the best that ever do it at Iowa. Who am I to try to argue with that? And I don't know that I can see anything different. He does things on the mat that nobody's able to do. And it's, to get in a situation like you did the other day and still get the fall. I mean, that's not what you normally see out of wrestlers. That's not how you see out of normal human beings. And so I think in some ways, just what he's able to do is just so remarkable that I hope everybody appreciated his 6 years at Iowa and, 5 years as a wrestler. He's now, unless he loses, and I don't see that happening, he's going to go down as a 4-time national champion. That's never happened before in Iowa. He was the best for the 5 years he competed, because the COVID year took away his championship hopes. And, he began his career the same way he ended it. He stuck a kid in less than a minute. I think it was against Michigan State right away. And it was against a pretty good wrestler at that point, and stuck a kid from Oklahoma State to end it. His name is going to be synonymous with greatness. And as much as Caitlin Clark is a global figure, there's nobody bigger in his field than Spencer Lee.
Going for 4. How many are there? Do you know how many there have been? 4-time national champs?
I think it's 7, 6 or 7, something like that, or 5.
Yeah,
5, 6 or 7, something like that.
Rare air. And Spencer will, Big Tens, I believe, are next weekend, March the 4th and 5th in Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
So go for another Big Ten championship there before the NCAA tournament in Tulsa later in March. So wrapping up a great career there, as did, he certainly deserves a lot of attention. Jacob Warner's had a good career too. I know can be frustrating for people because he can be passive at times, wrestling, just kind of waiting sometimes, and for the right time to make his move, and it doesn't come, and he can frustrate people. Max Murin has had a really good season this year, and Real Woods, obviously a huge addition from Stanford. So, I don't think people are giving Iowa much of a chance here in the postseason, at least in terms of the national title, and then obviously Big Ten with Penn State. But, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If Iowa can wrestle to its potential and maybe catch some breaks, it always feels weird. It still feels weird going into the postseason with that thought in your head that Iowa won't win it all.
I think winning the Big Ten might be more difficult than winning the national title. And just simply because I think Penn State has enough really good wrestlers that they're probably going to overwhelm everybody at Big Tens. And that's going to be tough to overcome. However, when you get to the national tournament, and let's say, what they didn't have last year, they didn't have Spencer Lee going out there and racking up points, extra bonus points at every single match. And I expect him to do something comparable to that. I think Real Woods has a chance to win the national title. But what you need are guys like Warner, Murin, Cassiope, and a few others to go out there and meet or exceed their seed, and then potentially have an upset here or there. I mean, Dayton Fix, is kind of like the Susan Lucci of national tournaments. But if he goes out and beats Roman Bravo Young on the Saturday night, then, hey, that keeps Penn State from having points. Those are the luck things.
Yeah.
If Cassiope can get if somebody upsets the Penn State heavyweight, and maybe Cassiope does, and maybe he beats Mason Paris from Michigan in the finals, or, there's those types of opportunities. Jacob Warner got second last year, as you said, an incredibly frustrating wrestler to watch at times, because, and the loss to Minnesota was kind of the cap to that, where he allowed a takedown with a fraction of a second left, and it was legitimate. And it was like, what are you doing? I mean, he's like the anti-Iowa wrestler, where you want to see all this, wrestle to the dull of a whistle type of thing. And he's kind of not that way, or at least not really as aggressive, but he's still got the potential to do it because he's done it. And so if they can get, they get 4 or 5 guys to get on Friday night and move 3 or 4 of them to Saturday night, they're going to have a shot. And then everybody meet or exceed their seed, because some guys aren't going to win. Some guys you just hope get All-American. Some guys you hope you get to, place in the high, in 6 or better. And if you're wrestling in the 5th place match, get 5th. If you're wrestling in the 3rd place match, get 3rd. Those types of things will always help. And then, of course, a little luck on the Penn State end.
And I looked it up. There have only been 4-time national champions, I should say. Pat Smith, Cale Sanderson, Kyle Dake, and Logan Stieber was the last one. And that was 2015 when he completed the feat. So 2 guys going for it this year, Spencer Lee and Yanni, I can't pronounce that last name, Scott, Diacomola Halalis. I butchered the hell out of that thing,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is going to be a fun March, I think,
Yeah.
all around for all of the winter sports. And baseball off to a good start last weekend. Certainly gets competition ratcheted up this weekend. They will face number one LSU down in Texas, the Round Rock tournament. So take a little break here, and we'll come back and talk some football, because we are obligated to talk about football on this podcast, and we will do so after this. We're back. Thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate the support of the podcast. Able to bring you podcast Monday through Friday, Hawk-centric podcasts, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the flagship podcast with Pat Hardy and the guys at KCJJ. Tuesdays, the mailbag. Thursdays, Scott and I do the Hotspot podcast. Next week, maybe a little jumbled. Scott will be at the Combine in Indianapolis. Also wanted to point folks, I did a podcast this week, a prospect podcast. Those pop up every now and then on this feed as well, kind of an additional podcast. Was able to get together with Khalil Tate and John Nestor, Chicago defensive back, Southsiders. Did a podcast with them. That was fun, so check that out on the feed. White Sox fans, Scott, they don't like the Cubs.
Well, they'll fit in with maybe they could be after Kylie Feuerbach leaves, because she's a Chi Sox athlete. Maybe they could get that line too. So it's always funny when you get Chicago guys. The Chicago guys are Sox guys. The suburbanites are the ones that the suburb guys. Those are always the Cubs fans. So it's fun to see that.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing those two in black and gold. I think both have really nice potential and versatility as defensive backs. So I'll be interested to see how their careers unfold here when they get to town. Staying on the recruiting, Scott, I think we may be starting to hear a little bit about a kid that may be the next big thing in the state. I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but out of Fort Dodge, Deshaun Ross won a state championship as a freshman in wrestling last weekend. And then this week had some football offers come his way, including one from the Iowa Hawkeyes. Man, watched him wrestle. He does not look like a freshman.
No, he doesn't. He looks like the next big thing, as you said. And I know Purdue came in and offered him. I think a lot of schools have started to knock on his door. So the next big thing that's going to fill the state with angst, over
exit Ben Keeter,
yeah,
enter Deshaun Ross.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, in the recruiting front, it's going to be like, is he going to go to Iowa or is he going to go somewhere else like a Caden Proctor? So is he going to be Xavier Wampa or Caden Proctor? I think we'll find that out. But next big thing there. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Ben Keeter. What a tremendous career he had as a prep athlete. Winning none of his first three matches at state, none of them lasted to the second period. And then he won by Tech fall, just a measly Tech fall in the final.
It almost seemed in that final, and not to take anything away from the kid he wrestled, who I thought wrestled his ass off, but it almost seemed like he wanted to make that thing last because he knew it was his last match.
Yeah, could be. I know. And, I talked to Mark Ironside about it, and he's like, that kid's a stud from Dubuque. He's like really good. And most years he'd win state, but you've got a superhero. And, kind of capping this off, I think he's the second guy from City High to go wire to wire undefeated with 4 championships. And I was a year older than Jeff McGinnis, and I wrestled in high school for a couple of years. And so, he was at 103, and you just knew he was just going to kill everybody who he wrestled. But I think Keeter might be better, actually. And Keeter has just been incredible. And I do wonder, kind of like we could talk about Brody Breck too. He had an unreal debut. But when you look at Keeter, how long could he go as a wrestler and a linebacker in college at a level like Iowa? That's going to be interesting to watch. I think he could do it for a year, because maybe next year he's a special teamer. I think he'll play right away for the football team. Maybe he even gets into the depth chart. But on the wrestling team, he's an Olympian, man.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, as good as he is at football, I mean, he's incredible at wrestling. I mean, like you said, world class. So I don't know. Does playing football take away from the ceiling he could reach in wrestling?
Yeah. And almost every linebacker has, I hate to say it, has a shoulder issue. Because you're hitting people in practice, you're hitting people, but in games, it's physical to an extent that unless you've experienced it or seen it really up close, you can't fathom. It's a car wreck out there. And Iowa is very, very physical in practice too. So is he going to be able just to take the shoulder pads off after a bowl game and go out there the next week and go out and wrestle in the Big Ten at a heavyweight and compete at a high level? I don't know. That's, he's probably going to have to make a decision at some point, because can he be an NFL linebacker? I do think that's the case. But he could also win a gold medal at the Olympics. And so he's, maybe he's going to be kind of like Brody Brecht, take it as long as he can, but Brody's a receiver and a pitcher. This is a linebacker and a wrestler. Their seasons are split apart. Iowa wrestling and Iowa football are concurrent to some extent. So I think it's going to be intriguing to see how long this lasts, but I do think he could play both and play both at a high level. I could see him being a starter as a linebacker by his second year. And I could see him winning a national title in his first year as a wrestler if he is able to be physically capable of doing that.
Yeah, I'm rooting for him. Hope he does well and reaches all his goals, in his dreams, and hopefully he stays healthy and can compete at the highest level at both sports. And Brody Brecht, transitioning to him is 5 innings, I think, this past weekend, 10 Ks, no walks, which is a big thing for Brody. He's starting to develop those secondary pitches. He's always been able to bring the heat, but he's developing as a pitcher, which is really impressive when you consider that he's also putting a lot of time into football as well. He told us in December, Scott, that football's his favorite sport. So I think he's going to continue to do this as long as he can. And hopefully he can do it for a while. We saw Connor McCaffrey try this. He went through illness, injury, eventually, gave up baseball and focused on basketball. But it's unique. It doesn't happen a lot. We saw this more when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s. It's just so much harder now with specialization and 12 months a year training for each sport.
And it's so difficult at this level. It's tough enough for athletes at the high school level, because as you said, there's so much. And I remember growing up in this state, and it's unique in its own right, where it's 4 seasons. We have baseball in the summer, and that's really, that's something even in the 90s, I thought needed to start to change, because I remember, a lot of baseball players were like, look, we've got, everybody else is traveling and we're playing in state. We already lost the chance to get scholarships, or we're getting a late last look. But then over the last 20 years, you've had the rise of AAU and football camps in June and June and
baseball showcases.
Yeah. And so in this state, I kind of wonder, maybe it needs to be the big schools first to kind of lean on this, is go to a spring model. And I know the association has always tried to dissuade that, because the track meets their baby. They want that track meet to be a big deal. And if you're going to have you're going to have kids making a choice, or, trying to do both, which I think they can do at this level. I mean, track and baseball isn't exactly, like cross country and football, but still it's going to be, we've seen it, and especially with girls, I remember in the 90s, they'd play up to 50 regular season games, and that tournament didn't end until August.
Yep.
And then they just started losing players left and right, because, hey, they want a summer too. This is their summertime. They want They want to go to the pool. They want to go to hang out with friends, and they don't want to play 6 days a week. And then now you have the opportunity to go to camps and travel, with softball or basketball or whatever. So I think in this state, they're going to have to make a decision at some point. Maybe it's kind of come sooner than later. I mean, I know I like the weather. I always like going to small towns, especially in the summer and in the middle of June, and you're at Louisa Muscatine High School or Wilton or someplace like that, and watching baseball. But I don't know that it serves the kids of the state the way it once did.
Yeah, I would agree. It'll be interesting to see, because you kind of get that vibe now with girls wrestling taking off. I think I talked about this on the podcast. Some of the girls basketball coaches, which is such a big sport in this state, girls basketball, and the history behind that sport, now are some of those athletes going to leave or not leave? I think if they've played basketball, they'll probably stick with basketball. It's that those grassroots levels, those feeder programs, do some of those kids when they're young, and we see it so often now, they're starting so young. Do some of those athletes choose wrestling over basketball at a young age? And then that, kind of, for lack of a better term, waters down the basketball product. Time will tell on that. But from the collegiate level, it's just, there just aren't as many two-sport athletes as we saw back in the day. And it's because specialization, a lot of it has become specialized. And I mean, Scott, you even look at guys like Tristan Wirfs and AJ Epinesa. Those guys were, nationally recognized track athletes. Woody would have loved to have had them compete at Iowa for track, but they didn't want to take away from football development. It's worked out okay for both of them.
Yeah, they ended up with nice paydays. Yeah.
But it would have been cool to see them in track in college.
Right. I mean, AJ Epinesa might have, been, who knows how far he would have gotten in the discus, but I think he would have been a really high level performer in the discus at nationals, and who knows, at an Olympic level possibly. And Tristan Wirfs was phenomenal in the shot, and yeah, it would have been a lot of fun to watch them compete in those events. But again, a lot of those guys just want to center on one thing and wants to specialize, and it makes sense. I mean, one turns out to be an all-pro, and the other is a quality player, sometimes starter, and would be a starter for most teams in AJ Epinesa. So I think that's, I think they made the right decision. It just kind of robbed us a little bit of the fun and the experience of what they could have offered in that sport.
Want to do a little combine preview here, Scott. What's your focus heading to Indy next week?
It's going to be all over the place, Rob. It's going to be not only on the Iowa guys, but I've got about 15 stories on other guys, on bigger picture stories, trying to scout through the, guys moving around in the portal and how that's impacted.
Who's there for Iowa?
They've got 5 performers. You've got Lucas Van Ness, who's going to be a high first rounder, top 12 probably.
Seems to be moving up.
Yeah. Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Riley Moss, and Kayvon Merriweather. And then they've got a few others who won't go there, who will test on their pro day and are probably more in the undrafted free agent realm. John Wagner and Monty Potabom and Seth Benson. So they didn't go to get the invite, but there's several from around the Big Ten, and
how much from an Iowa standpoint, how much can these guys help themselves next week? Actually,
quite a bit. And a lot of times I scoff at the underwear Olympics and all that kind of stuff. But if Lucas Van Ness looks like the Marlboro Man anyway, if he goes out and he performs Tarzan, there's what's the other one?
Hercules.
Hercules. That's what Noah Shannon called him, Hercules. If he goes out and performs like that he's solidified himself maybe as a top 10 pick, and people have already questioned, well, why hasn't he started? And I don't always give Iowa a pass on this, because I do think he should have played a little bit more, but his snap count was as high as anybody else on the defensive line except for Logan Lee. And he was a sophomore. It wasn't like he was a junior or a senior. So it's, there's a little bit of a apples oranges thing there. But if Riley Moss goes out and runs a 4.3, that's going to be big time helpful for him. If Jack Campbell goes out and runs a 4.5 and shows really good agility in those drills, then people are going to look at him differently. And so it's not so much, I mean, their tape is their tape, and that's what people are going to draft him on. But it's more like when you look at, Campbell, for instance, it's like, is he quick enough? Can he, is he just kind of an old school thumper in the box guy? Well, no, he's really quick. He's agile. He can do all these things. Well, then, he's a no-brainer for us in the high second round rather than mid-second round. Or, Laporta, same thing. There's not a lot of separation among the higher end tight ends, but if he's as fast as any of them or faster, then people are going to give him second look. And Kayvon Merriweather just needs to build a resume in that area. He's probably, 6th, 7th round, maybe undrafted free agent. All that kind of gets put together at the end. But if he goes out and tests really well, and one thing we do know is if he has meetings with coaches, he will do very, very well in that area. That's where he'll wow people immediately. Then he becomes a drafted guy instead of a non-drafted guy.
Yeah, I would say discipline, and I get it. I mean, you can only have so many guys from the team, and Seth Benson is not cookie cutter NFL, size, kind of like Josie Jewell.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Seth Benson is Josie Jewell, but I would have liked to have seen him get an opportunity in Indy.
I do too. I think he was one. Every year there's always a guy who disappoints me, doesn't get to Indy or doesn't get drafted. And I'm like, how the hell did that happen? And he's probably one, certainly in the front part of not going to Indy, because he's as pleasant of a young man as we were around. There were a lot of really good ones anyway there, but he's one of them.
It's a great group this year. All these guys that are going to Indy and this senior class as a whole.
They've got a lot of good young men that'll do good things once they're done with football. And they've got a void of leadership. And a lot of times it's easy to overlook that. And I don't like always to write about senior leadership, but this year they had it stacked. And I think when you look at Seth, when he's on campus, if he does really well in his pro day, which is about 3.5 weeks away, if he does well there, then, he'll have some meetings that day. I'm sure he'll have some conversations. And then, the other part is then they'll bring him on. A couple teams might bring him into their facility and look at him. And, it gets really weird in the draft where you get teams that have, like, let's say, Cincinnati. I'm only using them as an example. Let's say that they've got 48 guys that they're like, you know what, this is our core. They're not going to lose their spot unless they're hurt and they're going into injured reserve, which gives us a pool of about 5 guys to draft from, that will probably our draft that'll probably make the team. And they have 8 picks. Well, what do you do with the rest? And so you don't really, if you're Seth, you don't want to go there. Where you want to go is one of 2 spots. One where, New Orleans is in salary cap hell. They're like $60 million over the cap. They need cheap guys who can play right away. And so maybe he walks in, he plays special teams. He's smart. He's great. Okay, well, we're going to sign this guy. Or he needs to go to a team probably like the Bears that are just so bad. And they have so many openings that he can go in and make his mark and then they'll pick him up. So, those are the things that are kind of behind under the radar that people need to really watch for when you start talking about undrafted free agents and stuff, because it does matter where you go. And, sometimes you just want to go to one team. Well, you got to look and see who's there. What's their cap situation? Are you just a camp body, or are you a guy that has a legitimate chance?
And we'll have Scott in Indy next week, and we'll like I said, try to get together on a podcast with him down there. If you're really champing at the bit and want to see Hawkeyes play football, you've got the XFL, Scott. 3 Hawkeyes, former Hawkeyes in the XFL, Jack Kerner, Sean Byer, Jack Heflin. I haven't watched it yet. I'm not a big XFL, USFL guy. I'll put it on, but it's just, I have a tough time sticking with it.
Yeah, me too. I usually only like to watch those when somebody I covered is competing in a position where they're going to get a lot of touches. It's like we've seen like linemen play on there, and like I don't know if I want to watch somebody, no offense to Jack.
No offense.
Jack.
No offense to the lineman.
Yeah. But I don't know that I want to watch an XFL game with Jack Heflin in it, Now, Sean Byer might be kind of interesting if he can get some passes thrown his way, or if, Jack Kerner makes some interceptions or some big hits. But it is football, and the numbers show that it dwarfed. I think the numbers for that dwarfed like the NBA, and and here's just shows you in a microcosm how much of an NFL nation this is. The Pro Bowl, which I would not even bring myself to try to watch this year because it was flag football, had way more viewers than the NBA All-Star game. It's just the nature of the beast. So
I wouldn't watch either one of those, but
yeah,
to each his own.
I know. I tried to watch the Pro Bowl last year, the last padded up one, and it was gross. It was like nobody wanted to hit anybody, and understandably so, but it was like, I can't. This is beneath my standard. So this year with flag football, I had zero interest in that. I'd rather watch YouTube videos of nothing. Of the guy that brings the little thing that squeezes it like Walmart, and it makes a really crazy sound, and everybody turns around.
Yeah,
I'd rather watch that than watch the flag football.
Just to have skills competitions for both. I think people get off on dunk contests and 3-point shootouts, and you can do different things in football, passing, and different type of skill challenges. I think people get off on that too, rather than having some charade of a competition that they're trying to pass off as a game that represents that given sport.
Right. And I guess, I was just exhausted by all of the commercials for the flag football and the skills competition, because the skills competition actually interrupted, I think it was Iowa, Maryland women's basketball. It kind of bled into that. And a lot of, my wife being one of them is like, what the hell is all this football stuff on there? I don't know. I'm sorry. Check ESPN Plus. We do have that. Well, how do you get to it? Well, okay. And I'm at the game trying to text her, okay, go to this and then go to that. But anyway, yeah, it's but at least if you're an Iowa fan, at least you got to be happy you don't have to worry about the Longhorn Network like the Iowa State fans do, or won't anymore. But but the other day where Texas and Iowa State, 2 ranked teams, are playing only on the Longhorn Network. That's good riddance to that thing if you're an Iowa State or Big 12 fan.
No doubt. Yeah. And see you, Texas and Oklahoma. Get the early exit. Speaking of bigger picture, at least away from Iowa, Big Ten, Scott, we talked about last week, and we'll finish with this. The meetings this weekend or this week. You were supposed to be on vacation, but got drawn back in from the meetings with the ADs. Anything come out of those yet?
No. I thought that
what's the holdup?
They're going to meet again in a couple of weeks, and that's when it'll probably be finalized. But at this point, it's kind of odd. I thought that they would just go ahead and announce it like in piecemeal, that in 2024 there will no longer be divisional play. We'll go to a single conference format. We're still working out the details as to what that entails. But they're going to meet again probably around the Big Ten tournament. Is it going to be a matter of, do they say, well, we want to get it all taken care of at that point, and then and then the fall we release the schedule, or what do you want to? I don't know. they just kind of dragged their feet on this. So I would expect it to be announced fairly soon. It seems to be the case. Everybody's pointing in that direction. There's a general consensus that it's going to be no divisions. I think the playing games part of it is who plays who with and what frequency is still probably a little bit more requires a little bit more discussion, but I don't know that it needs that much more. I mean, the one thing is they've got a short timer at commissioner, and so that does add to it. I think if Jim Delaney was there, it would have been done by now.
What's the prognosis on the new commissioner? What's the timeline on that?
They've paid outbound for a company to start vetting a lot of the candidates. That happened a couple weeks ago. But so I think they're just still going through that process. I don't know how much longer before they start to really center on some candidates who might be some of the higher end prospects. I would imagine Jim Phillips, the former Northwestern AD who's now with the ACC, would probably get a strong look. I don't know if that means he'll, has he done a good enough job with the ACC to merit a bump to the Big Ten? I don't know. I know from talking to Gary Barta, one of the things that he wants, and I think is probably shared by the majority, is somebody who's been around college sports. Not one of the, Kevin Warren was outside of college sports. The Pac-12 and Big 12 commissioners came from different outside perspectives, but now that their media rights deals are agreed upon and expansion is taken care of, they really want somebody to be able to focus on the issues that impact athletics and university life on a daily basis. And that includes student athlete welfare to NIL and transfer portal and dealing with the NCAA and potentially new governance structures for football. And so they want somebody who's kind of had that background, and the perfect guy would be Gene Smith, but I'm not sure that he wants that. And I'm not sure that, do they need to look at it big picture, long-term? I mean, one of the things that's strange, Rob, that when we think about us covering Iowa and the Big Ten, is both structures have been so locked in on the people for so long. I mean, we're talking about Barta's only the third AD since 1970. Jim Delaney did it for 30 years. Before that, Wayne Duke did it for close to 20. Now Kevin Warren leaving after 3.5 is like, whoa, this is crazy. But so I don't know. Does the Big Ten need to think of it as a 5 to 8 year type of scenario, or do they need to look at it as a generational scenario like it was with Jim Delaney? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they prioritize in this process and how they arrive at a final decision. And if they're able to get the candidate they want. I mean, it could be somebody out there that they want, that like Gene Smith, who's just like, not for me. I've seen from the outside what goes into that position, and no thanks. I will pass, and I'll be in Columbus if you need me.
Yeah, exactly. Now he's taken a strong leadership role. It's much stronger than before, and part of that is Kevin Warren probably not having that strong role. And Kevin did some really good things, and I know I texted you on this to see if you saw that special on BTN that they did where the student athletes went from Selma to Montgomery, and it was remarkable. And his words were very touching, and you could tell that how much it meant to him and to the athletes who participated in that. And I do think that he has had the athletes' best interests at heart when it comes to these types of, whether it's experiencing civil rights, learning experiences, to mental health issues and all those things. Kevin Warren has been at the forefront of that, and I don't know that there's going to be anybody better than him on that. But when it comes to building consensus within the Big Ten, and then with his peer group, peer institutions, and peer peoples, like the commissioners, he hasn't been very good at that. And so they do need somebody who can kind of work the room, and it's unfortunate because the people that come to mind first are probably close to retirement or already in retirement, like a Bob Bowlesby, a Gene Smith, people like that could walk in. That'd be a typical job for an an athletic director at Iowa, but I don't know that Gary Barta could handle that role. That would be a little bit difficult for him.
Agreed. We'll see how this all shakes out, and we'll get an idea. New commissioner, announcement on moving forward with conference alignment, whether looks like it's going to be no divisions, and then figure out who plays who and all that's good stuff coming up. We'll have plenty of that to talk about. Scott and I, as I said, will be back next week. We hope at some point. I've got some girls basketball state tournament to shoot in Des Moines. Scott's going the other direction to Indianapolis, but we'll try to meet somewhere in the middle and do a podcast next week for you guys. Always getting closer to spring football. So, and the postseason for winter sports. So February is almost over. Next time we talk to you, it will be, so most likely, and have plenty to talk about with an exciting month of March and heading into the spring, and hopefully done with ice storms and snowstorms and all that stuff. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors. We appreciate it here on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. You guys have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again